It's not the same kind of morning now, huh? A little 9:30. Usually I get up real early. But I think today we've hit upon a topic that's actually right up your alley, which is Saudi Arabia. Remember when Refinitiv did that conference that was supposedly about anti-money laundering in Saudi Arabia? It was right before that OPEC conference last year. And it just so happens that OPEC conference was on the anniversary of that Gazprom Russia bonds conference from 2017. And these things, they just go through my mind. Sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe they mean something. Just so happens the anniversary of that Gazprom bond, the Gazprom finance Russia bonds conference 2 years later fell in this time frame when there was an OPEC conference, I believe in Vienna. And shortly before that, I found this information that Refinitiv was doing a training with the nation of Saudi Arabia about AML. But the problem was, I had gotten all this information, including from the Federal Reserve and the Department of Treasury concerning updates to American money laundering or anti money laundering procedures, and somebody stole it from my desktop. And it was missing. I couldn't find it online. And it was as if they were playing this little search game. It's like little, yeah, we took it. Come find us. I'm like, okay, so somebody thinks they're cute. I'm doing information, I'm acquiring what's supposed to be official information by federal agencies and monetary authorities because I've been working on this AML system myself personally since the beginning of 2018. I had a very specific manner in which I was going to apply what I understood or called a self tax, a voluntary tax of a very small percentage connected to issuances of securities in the name of whatever the person would be. And that could be given as or used by somebody that was tracking these securities in order to assess or attempt to identify financial behavior or activity connected to that security that was not authorized and that was not explicitly defined as being specific to that security. So if somebody's trying to launder money or if they're trying to use information connected to your instruments and it is not a part of a determinate program that's already been approved and that can be verified, then the understanding was that this would provide a means by which to track efforts to disabuse access to what was yours and what you knew and what was official in order to locate them. And then, depending on how you engage with the entities you identify around this tracking process, there's a variety of remedies, right? But I did not know, as naive as I did not know that people were in the process of making a game that was actually a farce of actual AML efforts. I didn't know this. I didn't know that people were intending to literally try to normalize and legitimize a complete shadow economy that's based on massive financial exploitation. And that literally we were going to get to the point where, as I understand, the Federal Reserve is discussing the legitimization of non legal tender currencies that are supposed to be able to run concurrent to legal tender currencies. In effect, create a monetary system of haves and have nots to legitimize the rampant exploitation of people. Well, what determines whether or not you're somebody who's allowed to have a legal tender currency or somebody who's not allowed to have a legal tender currency? These things have been going on for years, and shortly around the time that I discovered this information about the Refinitiv conference, I also discovered some information about a port security conference in Singapore. And I was concerned because I had found earlier, when I was on the streets, by the way, when I was trying to implement my own form of a anti-money laundering strategy, because I was constantly being used for acts of laundering, specifically in connection with executive compensation or severance connected to people leaving one executive position and transferring or transitioning into another, including people previously employed in the financial sector that were going to work at weapons companies. I'm a homeless woman on the street. I'm running a report in my mind speaking out loud, following up on elements of my own efforts at investigation and prosecution. And in the course of that, and making connections I hadn't previously made, because you don't go through the same thing every day. And then the next day, specific benchmarks are not being identified as something that is available for prosecution of criminal charges connected to trafficking and other crimes. No. Somebody's getting acknowledged through a public notice that they just got a new job with a weapons company. That's one of the primary targets of my investigation. Why is a homeless woman on the street running currents connected to somebody leaving one job and getting another job like that? Is that my fault? Or is that a failure on behalf of people like you and who you would, I guess, identify as your colleagues because you probably return their fucking phone calls? So what were you actually doing? What was Refinitiv actually doing at this alleged anti-money laundering session in Saudi Arabia? And why at that time was information from the Federal Reserve site and the Department of Treasury strategically and conveniently not available? Did you rent out or loan out American AML policy as part of the underwriting or floating on what Refinitiv was doing with Saudi Arabia? Okay, let me ask you another question. What relationship does Refinitiv have with Reuters and the manipulation of actual journalistic publications that are strategically disappeared or manipulated and are now even more difficult to come by because we're all reliant on the electronic medium of the internet because we're banned or closed off from being able to go to the library because it's an emergency. So I can't cross-reference information that's going on electronically and make sure that what I already have from my historical research matches up with what appears to be misrepresentations currently available on the internet by checking actual paper documents that would be a part of public repositories like a public library. Is that what you were doing there? Are you actually doing economic engineering? And do you just not want to have to apply anything that would be considered a consistent or verifiable standard when it comes to principles around an engineering paradigm? I could be wrong. Okay. Maybe I've gone too far. What's your relationship with the uranium sector? Am I going to find that? Are you going to be able to give me some advice on what it means to be conscious that for over 3 years I have been trafficked in connection with illicit derivative activity associated with the uranium sector, while rather than allowing me to study non-destructive testing and be put into a formal apprenticeship program where I could get on-the-job experience to qualify as an inspector of industrial materials up to and including a gas and oil pipeline and or up to and including an actual nuclear facility, I'm constantly being dinged to engage in illicit sexual activity. And if I even think about somebody being attractive, I gotta spend 2 to 3 days tracking down horrible, illegal, criminal financial activity happening that's literally exploiting me and people I used to know, including people I haven't been allowed to talk to for 20 years. What do you have for me today, Stephen? A picture of your great-grandparents and your father as a boy. Literally. That's what it opened up to. Okay, I don't do that. I'm exercising my right of first refusal. Eventually, all other bidders dropped out. It came down to us and Vornado, a large publicly traded real estate company owned by Stephen Roth, a friend of Sam's. Wait a second, isn't Vornado referenced in another book? Man, I probably really pissed you guys off that I'm not dead yet. could be wrong. Just give me a second. Just give me a second. I mean, you've taken how long to get back to me? You and your people? Hmm. Well. How many minutes I got here? Because I'm not finding it. Oh God, this is so horrible. It's in this book. I've seen it before. I remember thinking, I'm like, what a strange name for a company. It keeps coming up. It keeps coming up. It keeps and I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. Why would this name keep coming up? Well, we still haven't figured out the uranium thing. Why was it allowed to kidnap me and hook me up as a derivative for a uranium company that, if you cross-reference and follow trends going back for the previous 10 years, I was also being used as a derivative for? Was it just never expected that I would find that out and track it down? Let me ask you, you're an investment manager. You're dealing in uranium. For whatever reason, you've got assets that involve a need to acquire uranium. You find out the supplier of uranium is aiding and abetting an effort to specifically, strategically identify and target certain women to engage in highly illegal activity, including cooperation with public corruption through the local police departments to launder military assets in a hope of also being able to underwrite processes of smuggling uranium from or in connection with that company. What do you do? What do you do? Do you pull out? Do you assign it a markup on the non-legal tender currency market so that if something happens and they get caught, you can just transfer accounts, and then when it gets waived off, what do you call that? Let me ask you, how many times has something like that gone bad and then it got waived off on, I don't know, Afghanistan? And if it does, who do you charge it to? Who gets the credit? Do you credit the American financiers that are backing, maybe through contract bids through the DoD? Or is there some other sort of leveraging system that was set up by people in other countries so that they won't do anything to intervene, to forestall or impair the proliferation of the United States' efforts in Afghanistan specifically? Let me ask you, how many deals do you have outstanding from the Enron situation? Oh. You know what? I'm not finding what I was looking for here. Not right now. I've seen it before. It's probably one of those things where they're like, Colleen. We're going with Colleen? Right at 15. Colleen, we never valued you at the level of uranium. You were supposed to stick with chemical spills, right? Because little blonde girls have a different currency? Who do you give the uranium to? The Slavic women? I see. My grandfather is not Joseph Biden. Just so you fucking know.